Hello, I'm the Media Wiz, because one art form wasn't enough. Let's talk about Nickelodeon, because we haven't done that at all this year. Specifically, we're going to talk about Nick crossovers. When it comes to crossover media, companies have always tried on various levels of critical and financial success. Disney has had The House of Mouse, various crossovers with their live-action sitcoms, crossovers with Lilo and Stitch, for some reason, crossovers with Phineas and Ferb, and of course their most successful, Kingdom Hearts. With Cartoon Network, I always liked their advertisements with the CG City. Seeing all these characters in one prime location was incredible back in the day, and props to OKKO for referencing that in one episode. As for actual crossover episodes of their shows, most of them I haven't really liked. The closest one I thought was fine was the CN Invaded miniseries. And admittedly, that one comic book from 2014 I remember liking when I first read it, which I might do a review of that sometime in the future. And as for Nickelodeon, they've tried crossovers plenty of times. A theatrical crossover movie bringing together Rugrats and Wild Thornberrys, crossover episodes of shows like Rugrats and All Real Monsters, Jimmy Timmy Power Hour and I Party with Victorious, a comic book crossover with Rugrats and Rocket Power, and of course, their Nickelodeon video games. From 2005 to 2008, Nickelodeon's biggest crossover claim to fame was their Nicktoons Unite games, the first being about 4 main antagonists teaming up to destroy the universe, so 4 main Nick protagonists have to team up and stop them. SpongeBob, the face of the company, Jimmy Neutron and Timmy Turner, who have already had a crossover which is mentioned in the game, and Danny Phantom, because they needed a 4th person. The sequel game, Battle for Volcano Island, puts these characters, along with some of their secondary characters, on an island filled with crab people who need them to help stop some vengeful deity, because they're the chosen ones. Oh, and Jimmy is delegated from one of the main players to exposition in this one. Attack of the Toybots is about Professor Calamitous building factories that mass-produce evil robot clones of the Nicktoons roster, with our heroes having to go up against them. Tak from Tak and the Power of Juju, a game series that got its own TV show at the time, which I feel they were just trying to promote with this game, is now a main player, and they even added 4 more Nicktoon characters that you can play as, in non-story-based bonus missions. Although, to be fair, there is a battle mode that they're in, so that's good. And the last one being Globs of Doom, about an intergalactic evil that is so big, the heroes and villains have to team up to defeat it together. Plus, Timmy's not in this one, and instead they added Zim and Dib. All of these games have been both praised for their concepts and designs, as well as criticized for the levels being way too long and way too open, mismatched music, and certain levels of difficulty. Not to mention Globs of Doom having the blandest of the gameplay and the worst graphics of all the game, while Battle for Volcano Island is often regarded as the best for its level design, platforming stages, better music, and best overall story. I might do separate reviews of these games sometime in the future, but as for now, I highly recommend checking out reviews from Fred5107 and LS Mark. They did a really good job talking about these. Well, going back to battle mode, they have had a couple of newer Nick crossover titles with the Super Brawl World games, where you can play as Nicktoons characters from the 90s, 2000s to their few current shows in a non-bloody yet still badass fighting game. It's like Nick had their own Fighting is Magic that they didn't give themselves a cease and desist over. I only wish that they put this on consoles instead of just making it an app game. All that out of the way, let's get on with the main subject of today's review, Nicktoons Racing. This game was released on various different platforms, notably the PlayStation, PC, arcades, Game Boy Advance, which is the one we'll be reviewing today, and the first copy being released in 2000 on the Game Boy Color. Thankfully, we're not reviewing that because I hear it's the worst version of the game. Despite every version of this game being released by Software Creation and the GBC version being released by Pipe Dream, the Game Boy Advance version was actually released by Crawfish Interactive, because Nick wanted to be one step ahead of the breadline. Years later, everyone would try and jump on the Mario Kart train like DreamWorks and Garfield, so why not them too? Before they made even more Nick racing titles like Winners Cup Racing, Nitro, and Nickelodeon Kart Racers. By the way, this is going to be a first for me because this is the first racing game I've ever reviewed for Media Wiz, so let's see how this turns out. Racers, start your engines. This is Nicktoons Racing for the Game Boy Advance. As for minor story beats, various Nick characters have been invited to one big race, and they're joined by a mystery racer on the track. It's later revealed that this is actually Plankton, who set up the whole race to get the Krabby Patty secret formula. Because of course he does. As for the franchises being represented, you have characters from Rugrats, All Real Monsters, Wild Thornberrys, Hey Arnold, Ren and Stimpy, Angry Beavers, Cat Dog, and of course, SpongeBob. Like most racing games, there's a variety of tracks you can play as in 3 different cups. 4 tracks for each cup, 3 laps per track. Like you'd come to expect, each of these tracks are made to represent key locations from each of the shows, a lot of them being based around SpongeBob. I wonder why. Also, I just have to add, racing around the Rugrats living room makes me feel like I'm microscopic. I get it's meant to fit the whole baby motif, but it just feels a little bit weird. Other than that, the tracks themselves are well designed. They each represent their respective brands and their decent length. Sometimes they feel a little short, but it's not that big of a problem. When you first start playing the game, it might take a while to get used to the controls, especially with turning. The turns in this game are so sharp, and if you're not careful, you just might end up in last place. Maybe it's just me, but I thought this was supposed to be oil that was gonna make me spin out, but it's actually a hole that you fall down.
You're gonna get a little vertigo!
Other than that, the controls are fine, even if it takes a little getting used to the controls with the D-pad. You can also use items that are basically what you'd come to expect in a racing game. Something that wipes out those ahead of you, a force that protects you from driving off track, something that can jump you ahead, etc. Like with the tracks, they did a good job utilizing the items from each franchise. Like the bubbles from SpongeBob are used to protect yourself from being hit by other items. As for other modes in the game, there's Time Trial and Race for Fun. Time Trial is used to test your speed, and Race for Fun is just that. Race without being part of the race itself. If anything, this comes in handy for first-time players, and Time Trial is for players who want more of a challenge, more than just winning all 3 cups. Lastly, for the presentation of this game, they did a decent enough job. The music and sound quality is pretty solid. It goes without saying, but it's way better compared to something like SpongeBob Plug and Play. The character designs on the select screens look nice and never felt uncanny, and the sprites in the main game also look good. While not an amazing game, it is at least an entertaining title for the Game Boy Advance. Certainly better than that March of the Penguins game that I reviewed before. And besides, I would hate to see what the Game Boy Color version of this game looked like if it's that bad. And speaking of Nick games, tune in next time where we're going to be talking about a Jimmy Neutron based game. Until then, I'm the Media Wiz, because one art form wasn't enough.